I call the March 25th, 2019 Toxics meeting to order. I think the first thing on the list is the introduction and approval of agenda. So introductions. Hi, I'm Mark Kruger, industry advocate. Let's go this way.
Evan Chinkin, citizen advocate.
Crystal Abrams, citizen advocate.
Don Egan, industry advocate.
James Leffler, program manager.
Nicole Patterson, citizen advocate.
Okay, and then agenda, does everybody have a copy?
Yep.
Any objections to it?
Not for me. Nope.
Anybody want to make a motion on accepting it?
I'll make a motion to accept the agenda.
Second that.
Okay, all in favor, vote aye.
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 Opposed? Phew, that was easy. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get the hang of this.
Controversial.
Do we have any public
We
comment?
didn't have any public comment.
Okay. We're proceed through. Which brings us to staff report, right?
Yep. Okay, I got a list since it's been a little while. One of the things that didn't get on the list I wanted to bring up, because I just got the email, is the final determination was made on the appeal for the lawsuit of Childers versus et al. Versus City of Eugene, and the city prevailed on all counts. So the appeal at this point is over. There is still a small waiting period because they can request a rehearing or trying to escalate it up to the state Supreme Court. The city attorney is not really expecting that at this juncture because again the appeal was on all counts. It was given to the city. Also was a very robust decision. That was very clear. So at this point, the city attorney is working with finance and we're working through the billing of the past due bills from the plaintiffs. But it looks like hopefully this will be behind us and we'll be able to move forward. So that is kind of a big update right there that we've been waiting on for a while. Let's see here. Our last meeting, we had a gentleman from one of the other commissions or boards come and join us, Ralph McDonald, and was basically presented and wanted to elicit potential support from the Toxics Board for a couple of the initiatives that they were doing. At the end of the meeting, we discussed and found it was outside the scope of the board. I reached out to city attorney's office because of some questions, and the city attorney did agree with our initial assessment, which was saying if they are requesting something that's outside of the scope of the board's influence, then technically the board as an entity should not say one way or the other. Individuals freely can, as long as they're speaking as an individual. And the initiatives that were brought up were technically outside of the scope of what the Toxics Board is here to do. So that was kind of a big update along that front. I did send a letter to Mr. McDonald along those lines saying, we value coordinating with other commissions and boards, but being that this is outside the scope of the board, we can't say one way or the other, but thank you very much for presenting with us, and there was interest all around over what you were speaking. So kind of just massaged it and sent that on its way. So that's where we are with that, with those two items. There was a question on a previous meeting about, I had brought up saying that because of the vacancy in the program that we were under budget for the fiscal year. So there was a question of what happens with funds at the end of the fiscal year. We're still doing some research. We have a new deputy chief over the administration in the fire department. So they've been a little bit behind on some of the budgetary items because they've been getting everything up to speed. So we've been doing research. At this juncture, what it appears is that the The toxics program is a sub, we call it a work unit within the general fund. So at the end of the year, any overage or underage is covered by the general fund. And so if we have more money, it just goes into that bucket. If we did not have enough to cover things like legal, it just gets paid for. Normally, they look at the history. Normally, we ran almost flat, even every year. This year is the first year we're really seeing a big fluctuation because of that vacancy. So at this point, that's kind of where it's looking that it's going. We're still doing a little bit of digging, making sure that everything is kosher and how it should be. But that is the update I have currently at this point. I have began the process of putting the annual report together. I don't have that for this meeting. I will send an email out to everybody with what has been created at this juncture. Mainly I've been compiling the data. One of the big sections that I don't know the history of how you've handled it, the board recommendations. So as far as any program changes that should happen or not, what the board recommends. So that's the section that I don't really have anything for at this juncture. And so I'll be emailing out to get everybody's eyes on that, and so you can see some of the modifications I've done to the report, including, since we have the data, adding some charts to be able to see some trends and some history that I just think is a good thing to help bolster the report and the program. So that will be coming out within the next week for everybody to look at. And I added on the agenda, that might be something we want to talk about in a future meeting to move that forward. I have been looking through what Joe Epley's process was for auditing, and it was because of working through the annual report that a concern popped up to me, because there was a statement in there saying how they handled randomizing the audits over a 3-year period, that there was a potential that a new business could go 6 years without an audit, which technically takes us out of compliance with the charter. That's a problem in my eyes. So I started looking at how it was done, and I think there's some ways that we can alter some things, still keeping it within the goal of saying that it's randomized so somebody doesn't know well ahead to just kind of tweak their stuff to make sure it flies under the radar. But to make sure that it's a randomized audit by just adjusting the scope. But at the same time, I think I look at the term audit and what the charter is asking for within the audit compared to Joe's interpretation a little bit differently. The charter specifically said audit the process that the businesses use to get to their numbers. It really isn't talking about the numbers themselves, because the numbers is data verification. And every year, as the data comes in, I should be looking at that data and making sure, oh hey, for some reason your math isn't adding up. You might need to look at that. That's not an audit. An audit is saying, how did you get to these numbers? So that's a tweak that I'll be looking at and making sure that businesses are being properly audited. More than anything, I look at it as an education opportunity, of making sure that they're walking through the process correct. And just gives a point of contact. I don't look at it as something that's onerous, just making sure that we all are on the same page. But that's something that the charter asks the fire marshal's office to do. So that's something I've been chatting with the other deputy fire marshals on, making sure of seeing how they go through their process and making sure that we line up it as efficiently as possible. So I will be giving more updates on how that's looking in the future, because I've just been digging into that more recently. And that even goes along with looking at how we currently have people saying, okay, we don't have quantities. Well, that means I want to set up some standard circle backs to them and saying, okay, how about now? What's it looking like for you now? Or, okay, we are below the FTE levels. Okay, right now there's no formalized, this is how often we touch base with them again. So those are some of the things that we're going to formalize to make sure that people are being contacted in a reasonable time frame as situations change. Along with that, I've been doing a lot of work looking at new business identification, because I know that's been a concern all around for people, for companies potentially not in the program that should be, because they should be reporting on things, but also it reduces the impact overall to businesses as far as financially when they're, the rising water floats all boats, making sure that it's not just a few companies carrying the weight. And there's a potential, a large portion of companies that should be in this, anywhere from realistically maybe 80, but could be upwards of 150 to 180. It all depends on how many FTE they have. There's a lot.
Wow.
And that isn't accounting for ones that have already been contacted in the past that I need to circle back with and check to see, including some that have stated they did not use hazardous chemicals, that I think they just didn't realize what mundane substances they use were covered under the program. I mean, the easiest ones I saw were cabinet shops saying we don't, and I'm 100% positive that they use things like acetone or lacquer thinner, and both those would bring them under the program.
The lacquer itself.
Yeah, and or household bleach or hydrogen peroxide, standard sterilizing agents. They're going to be used, and there's just, I think, some misunderstanding of language and some things, because most things are saying they're focused on the manufacturing element. Well, if you're sterilizing something that's in the process, but yes, you're not building something, but you have to use that, and it goes into your waste stream. So I think there's just some clarification for some businesses that needs to happen. But that we'll see some more businesses coming to the program.
That's huge. That's a huge insight into the landscape of this program.
So that's my hope, is to see that expand, that will adjust some time taken to some certain things. So those were some, that I've been spending a lot of time on that and compiling Joe's previous data. Because she had a lot of data, but it was very spread out. So I've actually been compiling it into one comprehensive location to be able to track that in a more efficient way and be able to provide you guys with also better information. One other update that I wasn't able to get onto the list was, or two actually, board vacancies. So we finished technically the cycle for recruiting. We received no applications. So I spoke with city manager's office, and they're keeping it open for the toxics board so that we can keep recruiting. So we still need a industry advocate and an environmental advocate. So both roles are still open. And then last of all, the process for instituting the fee for the year. Yes?
The environmental advocate position that's coming open is,
I was planning on reapplying.
Okay.
Just for now.
Okay, that's okay. So, and that will be, so once you can get that in, that will fill that one. We still are waiting on a business advocate. I sent out an just email to every business saying, hey, this is a great opportunity for you, and crickets. So I'm still hoping to try to find somebody that fits the requirements.
I could probably strong arm somebody at where I work in it, but it seems very odd, right, to have two members from the same company, and I would prefer not to do that.
Yeah, that makes
Doesn't
sense.
overrepresent us.
What about that gentleman that was here last time from the logging?
Yeah.
Well, this
Oh,
gentleman.
oh, that was you, okay.
The challenge is, at this juncture, Zippo Logos is not a reporting entity.
We don't have toxic materials.
Oh, okay.
So that requirement is the one that is the biggest hurdle that we've seen. We've had other people that are non-reporting entities. They would be happy to be on the board, but they don't qualify.
That's built into the charter, which means that it's really hard to change.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, that may be something that has to be talked about? I don't know. That's outside my scope, but that is the thing that seems to be the biggest hurdle for the program in that front. And then last of all, I have the annual fee. So the board voted for what the fee should be last time we met. I was walking through with the city manager's office to get that in front of the city council. There was a miscommunication and then a rescheduling, and it pushed us out. So that has not gone in front of the city council yet. It'll be going in front of April 15th. I've already been working with city attorney's office, and in the ordinance that will be presented and hopefully just approved and signed, will give businesses a little bit extra leeway on time. So it's not a 15-day turnaround, but it will give them into solidly into May, which still is ample time. But we gave that a little bit extra room. So that I'll be handling that public comment and everything. Hopefully it'll all happen within the same week. And we will push that through as fast as possible. But that was a delay that was unforeseen. There's miscommunications. So those are my updates. Any questions on the slew of information I just threw out at everybody?
I guess if we want to check in after the meeting or another time and see what contacts we have and reporting businesses that we could connect with and urge them to join, would that be worthwhile to anybody?
So I sent out an email last month, I believe it was, that was a list of all the reporting businesses to everybody that I have on record. So if you know anybody in any of those businesses,
Okay.
Are you sending those emails to the individual or to the business?
I sent them to the contacts that I have at those businesses.
Why not send them to the business? That way somebody up above who's making a decision could urge somebody.
Well, and then you run into the situation, for example, I'm the most appropriate person for us to be here, but I have a limited lifespan, right? A maximum of 6 years, actually quite a bit less, because like you, I took over part of a term, right? So I all of a sudden become ineligible to be in the board anymore, but there are 100 and some odd other employees. I may not be interested because I can't. But and so I would assume other companies are in the same boat, that we probably tapped the person with the most appropriate job position, but there are probably other people in the company who could be drafted, be recruited.
So just a point of clarification. So there's term limits limited to 2 consecutive terms, but then is there term limits if they were to take a term off and then come back on?
Then it's fully refreshes.
Okay. Okay. So that
I need to confirm if that is a term or if that is a year. That I'm not sure on.
Yeah, I wonder if it's.
So I'll need to read over the charter on that front.
And I'm wondering if it's like the position, like is there advocate number 1, 2, and 3, and then is it business 1, 2, 3, and then if they can shift roles? I don't know.
You can't just shift
seats,
but it's as a seat on the board. So they have to take a break from that.
That may be something else to point out, that if you have a break, you can come back.
Yes.
Because obviously I was under the mistaken impression that there was a lifetime limit.
No, there's no lifetime limit. It is simply they just want to have fresh blood come in every so often. And so you can re-enter the board. It just you have to take a hiatus.
So the money that was created by Joe's departure and the gap. Ordinarily, that's excess money that would just go into sort of the fire department general fund, and then would be used to fill in other gaps or surpluses elsewhere.
That's what it appears. Also, one thing we don't have yet is what the bill is for this lawsuit.
Oh,
And that's gonna be big.
So the lawyers they're contracted, they're on retainer.
It's the city attorney, so it's in-house, but how the city operates when it's in between departments is that they bill across. So the city attorney will actually bill the program for, this is how much we have spent doing this.
Okay,
So it's almost like separate entities, but not.
I hear what you're saying.
Internal customer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So usually if I don't know how lawsuits works, but if the other party loses the case, sometimes it's built in to where they compensate for legal fees.
Get some, but it's never everything.
Yeah.
So not something like this. So I think we may recoup some cost, but this has been long and drawn out. So and hopefully they don't try to go farther.
Yeah.
Because that just increases costs more, and if they do, the outcome will likely be the same as far as what the city attorney feels at this point. And also because the reality is the Supreme Court only takes on cases that have a large impact, and this is so niche that likely they would look the same. There's not enough impact across the state for this to be something to be heard. Mind you, that's an assumption.
Yeah.
They could make a different determination if they want. The likelihood is no.
So we should just wait and see what.
Yeah, so right now we're waiting, as of the 20th, it's a 35-day waiting period that they have to file. So by the end of next month, we will know if this is all completely done. And then hopefully we also can collect on the fees that have been sitting there for a few years unpaid.
I'm wondering if the, I'm kind of split on term limits, incumbent advantage versus, allowing the democratic process, So is it, do we know if it's in the charter to not allow consecutive terms? So in that case, okay.
Yes, it is. It is in the charter as far as having to take time off. Let's see.
And don't really do that right now to clarify that.
Okay. So yeah, I can look into that more of what that actual language is and send an email out to everyone.
Only if it's not trouble, because I think that I could look it up on my own.
I'm constantly reading it because I'm trying to make sure I'm so,
Yes.
so that's fine.
So that takes us to the end of the staff report, right?
And the staff report.
Which then brings us to the big thing, which I believe is the work plan, right?
Yes.
So last time we had talked and we had voted on the budget, right? So that's sort of half of what we really need to get done. And then the other half is this piece, which then ran afoul of weather and meeting on vacation and everything else.
Recognized.
Anyway, how do we want to approach the work plan?
So with the work plan, I added in, per the request at the last meeting, the more traditional view as an appendix at the end, with each part saying which part of the charter mandate, but also referencing which program area and task number within the primary document, so it's cross-referenced. And I tried to consolidate items into common areas that had a synergistic relationship to be able to try and make it as approachable as possible to a larger audience. I did adjust certain numbers within that as far as my recommendation, which obviously we will talk about. A good example is I reduced the amount of time for budget, fee, and work plan, because after I technically looking at how much time it takes when you think of 2,080 hours over the course of the year, at 5%, that's still ample time to do the budget and all that. So I felt that going, at 10%, I was like, I am not spending 200 hours doing that process. So I made some adjustments there in some areas, which is my recommendation for where the allotments of time. I left in within the main document the percentage on each line item, each task that as we have them outlined. My recommendation would be to remove that in the final document. But this was for the ease of being able to see where things were attributed.
Was there any substantial changes from the last overtime, or is it pretty similar to?
Very, as in from the previous year's work plan, or from the previous edition?
Addition.
Very similar. The biggest change was the budget fees and work plan.
Okay.
In that section on the original, on the first one, that was set more at 10%. And then when I really started crunching the numbers, I had a hard time saying 10%. I'm like, I don't know how I would spend 200 hours doing that.
Yeah, okay.
So a lot of that I shifted to some other areas, including time of compliance and auditing increased, and I believe it was education outreach and PR increased.
Okay. Let's see, on that point, I think we discussed it, but like, about including, like internship kind of things that, considering like either a working board, like having, tasks that might support you, or just, utilizing, our personal networks to, hopefully facilitate your job, but without it being a net, time suck for you to have to deal with. And because I love the opportunity, as we talked, for, folks interested in, toxics or, reporting to get some, real world experience, but at the same time, not wanting to create this situation where it's having to, So anyway, let us know if there's any way that we can support with finding folks that might help you.
So you said with this new format, you're gonna have the old matrix, you just gotta take out the percentage?
So the matrix will stay as it looks here.
Okay.
Would look at that. It's in the main document where after each task line it says like a percentage, and then the overall section total. I would take out those small percentages. Was the original intent of the document. They can stay. Footnotes would stay.
It helps show that all the tasks are, they're not superfluous, right? Superfluous?
Yeah.
Superfluous, has extra fluorine in it.
It sounds better.
I'm a wordsmith myself. So is the board, we're looking this over, and then will we vote to approve or reject, or just make?
Or if you have suggestions of where if you feel numbers need to be adjusted, please, that's something.
I just have a question for you. Under compliance and auditing, how do you feel about only allocating 25% for all of these different tasks that you listed out?
That's a really good question. It's there's been potentially some shift in my thinking. I think that it has the potential to increase. The hard thing is because I haven't done it before, for me to say, this is how much time it's going to take, and also with me looking and saying how Joe did it and how I'm probably going to do it are going to be a little different. The reality is, most of the stuff under the compliance and auditing, we don't have to do, because there's a whole lot of the tasks that are if somebody is out of compliance. And so far we haven't had, our people that have been out of compliance, really, there hasn't been any. It's been people not paying a bill.
Right.
That's separate, technically. So people have been compliant. There's the potential that the auditing process will increase. Still, at 9%, if we round it up to 10%, again, that's 200 hours out of the year. So that's if I audited 20 businesses, which we only have 35 that are reporting. If I audited 20 of those, which is outside the amount that we ever do in a year, and I spent 2 hours at each one, that would hit 200 hours. So I think it's a reasonable amount at this juncture.
So as a follow-up to that, if you're planning to incorporate new businesses,
Mhm.
you mentioned that there were likely some that were non-compliant but didn't realize they're non-compliant.
Mm-hmm.
Would that alter then, if you're required to conduct site visits, would that alter this, or?
Well, that's where it depends on what bucket we want to pull from for that. Because it wouldn't really be auditing because they're not in the program yet.
Right.
So that could even be an element of outreach and education. Or is that part of program management? I think it kind of, we have flexibility.
There's flexibility.
And that's one reason why I like this format a little bit more than the traditional matrix, is because it gives that flexibility in there a little bit more. Ultimately, that's where I'm a little bit in flux on it. So
Okay. But you do feel like you have the flexibility within this to do that?
yeah.
Going back to that audit, the 9% there, around 10%, 200 hours, right? If there are 35 businesses, they need to be audited every 3 years. So that's about 10 businesses a year, which means about, and again, it's back of envelope, right? So that's about 20 hours, which is 2.5 days. I'm going to just make an audit might be 4 hours on site. You go on site, chat with them, right? And go step through the process, ask questions, and that leaves you 2 days to go and say, okay, so here's what I found that needs tweaking, and then come back and negotiate and work with the person to figure out. And so that seems like a reasonable amount of time. Yeah. Does that?
Yep, that answers, I think that answers my question.
And I base a lot of my concept of an audit off of two things. I mean, the obvious is if you have a tax audit, what are they doing in that process? The other one is I used to have to deal with safe audits every year at the company I ran up in Portland. And that process was they look through how are you getting to your numbers. There's always an adjustment that ends up happening in there, but they just walked through the process, and it was normally a couple hours on site, and then they get back to you saying, okay, here's what we decided. So yeah, about 2 to 4 hours for an audit. And at this juncture, we only have 35 businesses that have to be audited every 3 years. So it's really about 10 businesses a year.
Yeah. Sort of helping this as well. So there's, I think, about 12% for helping companies get their report in, right? We're close to that deadline. How much, do you have a better feel for how much time you're going to end up?
I'm just digging into that now because everybody's been reporting in about the last week or so. so I'm just getting ready to really start digging into that. I think we're really looking pretty good at this point. And there's also, again, flexibility, because what it's saying is that they need to report by this date. Does it say that they have to be correct and accurate?
True.
No, they're just saying they need to report. So again, we have flexibility there. My preference would be is please do it right the first time. But we actually have, right now my biggest concern is get your basic numbers in. And then I'm going to start doing the data verification, saying how accurate were you? Do you have any glaring problems as far as does your math add up? And then we'll deal with that. But as long as they submit their data by the deadline, technically they're in compliance. That's my thinking.
It's like tax day, you did it. You might not have done
You
it
did
right.
it. We may see a problem with what you did,
Yeah.
but you did it.
Yeah.
I mean, because if you think about it, the report, traditionally the report for what they're putting in this right now isn't until the end of the year and what's traditionally been done. So like right now, I'm dealing with data of 2017, not 2018, which broke my brain for a little bit
Oh, yeah.
when I was starting this process. But that's because normally, where the report normally lands, they haven't submitted the data yet. So we're almost actually a year behind on the report.
Okay, this is an autopsy, not a projection or something like that.
Yeah. So that's, and that was an idiosyncrasy that I didn't realize until I started digging into the annual report.
I'm cool with this. I mean, you seem comfortable with this. This all looks pretty good to me unless anybody else sees any big red flags or any room for improvement.
That's the way it is.
Yeah, it sounds like, you know, you have flexibility, so if new businesses come in or other things come up, then there's wiggle room, so, you know, we trust you.
And again, I need to fix a couple typos I've seen in here. Mainly, like if you see the first couple sections, it says the approximate budget fees and work plan total. Again, they are approximate. Any work plan is, this is what we're guessing. And as long as we're not deviating too far, that's not a
Who
problem.
would have the issue? If there was deviation.
We would.
Unknown, unknown.
I mean, you're in budget,
This is kind of the funny thing about this program. It's a program of one. It's me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, ultimately, if things got really weird, it would be the fire marshal, Amy Linder, who's technically my supervisor, would say, why are you so far divergent from what you guys anticipated? But for the most part, is as long as we are all comfortable with what is taking place. I mean, if we were sitting down together and you're saying, why, he said he was auditing, but I haven't heard of anybody having an audit, or, you know, things aren't happening on time, or things like that, that would be more of the discussion there. So really, that is the big question. Like, who really holds the feet to the fire on this? Not really a whole lot.
Yeah, or we do as a.
As an entity, because you would raise the question of saying, I don't see this as lining up. This doesn't make sense. And then we would have a chat.
What do we propose to approve?
To approve it.
I second that motion.
So I understand we have a motion to approve the work plan as is. Do we have, and it's been seconded? Okay, let's see, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, any discussion? And looks like it's been approved to the fiscal year 2020. Wow. Work plan is approved as written.
Thanks, James.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Right, that's the two really big things that we have to deal with
Yeah.
out of the way.
So, and then I guess my question for you, because of how I added for you, was the future agenda items. Is there anything specific you'd like to address for the next meeting, so I can prepare for that?
The annual report's coming up, right?
That would be the next, to me, the next logical thing.
And then, where were we on the issue of the map? That nebulous map that is 20
yeah.
years in the
Map.
making.
Well, we have a map. I can guarantee it's out of date.
Yeah.
And that is the problem with how that map was created. I had a chat actually with our head of all of the website for the city. And she gave me some contacts of some people where we can potentially look at doing something that's more of a interactive map format rather than a static document. Something that somebody can go to a web page and look at, okay, what are all the addresses of the reporting company, businesses in the area, and potentially look at, here's where I am, here's where they are. And that might be a little bit more useful than the previous map was, going a little bit more by zone. And that, the problem is it's already changed. Businesses have already gone out of business. new businesses have already come into business, it's out of date within 6 months. So I will begin more research on that, because that's where we sit right now. We have a map, but I'm not so sure it's up to date.
Okay, yeah, I like the idea, so it could be like a GIS, Google Maps kind of thing, where you see
Exactly.
little dots and you see locations, and then it's updated as, areas are annexed or this
Or as and I have to talk to them what the interface would look like. How do we add addresses? How do we not? Because just doing a generic, all businesses in Eugene, that doesn't really. The question always to me on this is, what are we trying to provide?
Yeah.
What's the purpose?
Yeah.
And if the purpose is just letting people know where businesses are, it's like, well, you can kind of go down the street and see that. But if it's saying,
But they're recording.
who are the reporting entities and are they near me? Well, that's a totally different conversation. And that's something that's more of a GIS concept of saying, here's all the pinpoints around you. That might be more helpful to a person rather than just a generic statement.
I'm wondering if, I know a couple of years ago, we dealt with that, some, like $5,000 to give to
Yeah,
some
SD,
data.
yes.
Yeah, is that fee something that we can use for this GIS thing, or?
I don't know, and so that's where I'll need to, I want to find out a little bit more information, because there may already be a solution out there for us, where it may not even cost.
I know.
And so that's, if it's something where it's just, we need to be able to input in, here's your list of addresses, and then it's there, well, that's an easy maintenance.
I vaguely remember from my prior employee that the city of Eugene uses something very similar to ArcGIS to maintain the public works and land use and all that sort of information, which could do something like this very easily. I dealt with that sort of thing a very long time ago. It was very easy to just have a map that would pop up data that was geotagged in it. Of course, then you'd have to publish it somehow, which is an interesting step.
Yeah.
Google has the same sort of capability, but if I remember correctly, they would probably want some sort of fee for a non-private use, for effectively commercial use. And I'm sure ISD would probably want to know that
Exactly.
that you're utilizing these tools before they, otherwise
Yeah.
you come and say, it's broken, and they go, well, what do you mean it's broken? You didn't tell us about it anyway.
No, and the city does use a GIS system, and actually that's what I was using in researching new businesses. Because they just rolled out allowing everybody in the city to use it. Because originally it was just planning and development and like public works that had access to it. Well, I was able to go and punch in every business on my list and say, are they in city limits? Are they out of city limits? That was one of the tools that Joe didn't have, which I think made the researching new businesses very difficult and arduous. Because just because it says it's Eugene does not mean it's in the city limits. And there's a lot of industry out on Highway 99 that are out of city limits.
So, I have a question about like the map and what its purpose is. Would it make sense to do like a tiered system that takes into consideration either the size of the entity, so what quantities of chemicals they're reporting, or some kind of hazard level? I think the EPA does like hazard levels of like specific, you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah, I know what you're saying. That adds a whole nother level of complexity. So that would be one, and data management.
Sure.
So, and right now the challenge would be is because our reporting system is so archaic, I don't think I can get that to talk to something else.
Okay.
And that's part of the discussion right now with the overall fire department, is that
Right.
they're trying to find a new system because the hazmat also uses basically another element of what
Right.
we use, and it's ancient.
Okay.
Maybe someday. I think right now the biggest question is if we can get just the map, and then potentially if we're able to get something that interfaces, that would be a nice slick little add-on. I mean,
The reason I ask is because I assume there's far fewer businesses that would fall into a category of housing very, very toxic chemicals at a certain level, right, at a certain quantity. So you
Yeah.
might actually find yourself with less work to do.
Yeah, well, that one, see, that gets into a whole nother level. Like, and interesting, because I just had a conversation with part of our hazmat team, is the concept of the very hazardous chemical.
Yeah.
How do you define that?
I think the EPA has.
There's
Yeah.
yeah.
But that's also within that of where does that evolve state-wise, it becomes very nebulous. Because there's some things that reference very hazardous chemical, but then within the city of Eugene and within the state, those aren't defined. And so it gets a little bit weird. And so it depends on what you're looking at and what's defining what. So, I mean, at this point, I think we can get a basic map set up of businesses, right, as far as tiering them and classifying them with the extra information. That will be an extra little bit of research that will need to be done of finding out how to do that in a reasonable way that's not labor intensive.
Phase 2.
I think stepping away from my industry advocate position as just a private person, if I were to see something like this, my first reaction, well, what's near me?
Yeah.
And of course, then I would be cute would be, oh, this company's near me, click, and then it takes me to the page where the report is.
Just like a Google icon.
Right, and that would be, and I think that would be the biggest, and please chip in, most useful aspect of it. Tiering past that, being able to slice data in other ways, like which companies are using this, and then also runs into, there were 1 or 2 chemicals I was looking, why the heck am I reporting? We don't use it. And then I look and it's, it's at 0.1% in another
That's
material.
actually why I brought it up, because if it's a small quantity, right, it's not a hazard to the community necessarily, right? So if a community member is using this map to determine like how, some sort of danger level or some hazard, right, that's near them, if there was some level of pre-digestion of the information, because the way that we have it reported, we just list the chemical names and it's a bit daunting.
It's at a CAS
Yeah.
levels. Yeah, I agree.
Right.
Like I said, it's at 0.1% of something large, and so it's distributed. It passes through the facility relatively quickly, as opposed to we have several gallons of this that just sit there on the shelf,
Right.
which in my opinion would be in a pure form, which would be far more hazardous.
My brain goes the same way as yours does. I was saying, first, what's the first thing always is, how close is it to me? And then, can I look from there of what they're doing, of what they have? I mean, I would love to see it, even a risk map concept.
Yeah.
To me, that is one of those things of saying, okay, your location, as far as what is being released into the environment
Okay.
from where I'm at. But that's a whole other tier of data analysis that has to be evaluated. And at this juncture, I don't know how to get it from here to there. But that's some questions I can start asking and look into, and especially by the capabilities of what system currently has. I think is a good place to start, and what modules are out there and even sometimes what other departments in the city are already looking at doing, because often we will piggyback on each other. And if somebody else is already looking at trying to do something like that, it's a whole lot easier to say, oh, you're doing that? How about we bring that our way? We just tweak some of the data, and then we don't have to spend money.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I remember Alton Baker Park had this hazardous disposal site on it, and that's like brown site. It's like there's poisons like leaking to the Willamette, and anyway, and now it's like they put a bunch of dirt over it, but it's still this disaster that needs to be dealt with. But I don't know. What? Yeah, right. I know.
There's dirt on it.
I know. But it's just like this question of like, how do you identify these and then do stuff? And I mean, it's complicated, but I think a map is something that people can immediately register with. They get it, they see them. But as I know we've chatted about what about wind direction? What about other things like the biomass incinerator. We don't talk about it. We don't talk about the U of O. We don't talk about the hospital and like what about what they're doing, and you know. But even so, it's still cool to see, you know, businesses. Anyway, that's a purple map idea.
So that would be, I don't know if that would be number 2. I think number 1 priority should be the annual report. I don't know if there's any objection to that in terms of the next meeting.
Okay.
Well, it sounds like a lot of the map-related stuff would be sort of off-cycle research or off-meeting research. You know, and then once you figure out, can the city support, or do we need to use an outside tool? Will that outside tool be compatible with the city? You know, that sort of, and then we can probably move forward with that. But we need that information before going there. Let's see what else we have there.
One thing I mentioned earlier about sending to the businesses instead of the contacts
Yes.
of the businesses, aren't you here for that same reason? Where your boss said, hey, this might be a good idea for you to go look at?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because of the collateral programs that,
Yeah, unfortunately,
Come in and-
you're not eligible, but,
Right. Oh, I could have a lot to say here.
oh, yeah.
I'm a transplant from California. I've done hazardous materials business plans and circular planning, and I could share how other municipalities handle things, but I'm not a member, so.
But I think that should be on the agenda. I'm recommending that be on the agenda for the next meeting, just to get a status of where you're at on that.
Mhm.
So, in essence, the line item for board vacancies is
Yeah.
what we're looking at. And talking, so the idea being talking, not to only the contacts, but talking to the company directly. Let's see,
You know, there's always somebody at the top there, whatever business that is.
Mhm.
And you address that email to, you know, CEO or general manager or whoever. And if HR opens it, it'll go to EHS people. But if management is interested in specifically like in this case here, you know, it's a perfect example that they say we should have a presence on that board.
Yeah.
And where they're just, you know, stuck in stuff.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I'm already thinking I'm going to send out a physical letter along with trying to use some more intentional outreach to some businesses. See if we can shake something loose or somebody loose.
I think that probably covers enough for the next meeting or 2.
I think so. And like I said, I will send out a copy of what I have right now for the annual report and kind of flag the areas where especially it's the board recommendations. Because I don't know how you've handled that in the past. If that's something that's just out of what has happened out of the course of the meetings over the year and then Joe just compiled it, or if there was a specific discussion around that. I don't have the history there. But that was one area within the report, and it specifically states in the charter that's something that the board is supposed to report back and give recommendations. So that would be the big area that I need your assistance on.
Having your input here is going to be, because we're relatively young as board members. If memory serves, sort of the report would be, the preliminary report would be generated draft report, and then there would be sections where new recommendations, we do plan on doing this, we
Okay.
support this, those were the items of discussion. Please correct me if I go off rail on that. Is that what you guys remember from?
I think that's right.
That sounds on point to me.
What you did.
Yeah, you are.
Perfect.
I mean,
So I will have a copy of the report, a draft copy for you promptly. So I have most of that put together as far as with the data side of things.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you.
That takes care of our list here. Anything else anything else anyone wants to know? In that case, this meeting is adjourned.
Thanks.